It's unfortunately a rare opportunity to hear such a wide-ranging global discussion about Britain's role in the world, because in British politics, we have a real lack of engagement with different viewpoints across the world. The perspectives of people from Asia, Africa, Latin America are too often shut out of the political discussion entirely. And this is taking place at precisely the time, as we've heard this evening, where the Global South is rising and putting forward an independent political and economic agenda, which is based on increasingly on peace, cooperation and development. And one of the key goals of No Cold War Britain is to create a space where these developments can be discussed, because it's really important to have this wide discussion, this global discussion, to understand exactly how isolated Britain actually is internationally, and the fact that there are alternatives to the path that Britain is going down, which is war and austerity and racism and climate change vandalism. In Britain, we've got a really dire mainstream political consensus. Both the Tory government and the Labour Party leadership agree that Britain's role in the world is as a junior partner to the United States, and that the rise of the Global South is something that needs to be stopped. The British Empire is long gone, but the colonial mindset, unfortunately, remains largely intact in the British political establishment. And this is seeing the views and aspirations of the majority of humanity regarded with suspicion and hostility. I think a number of speakers have pointed out that we are living through a really important moment in history. Significant changes are taking place in the world with the rise of the Global South. But these are also very perilous times, which I think is something Vijay was really emphasizing. The economic power of the United States is waning. And in this situation, the US is resorting more and more to using its military power to stop the great shifts we are witnessing in international relations today. Over the past decade, just one statistic kind of shows where the trajectory is. China contributed to 40% of global growth in the last 10 years, while the US contributed only 22% and the Eurozone 9%. This growth of China and relative decline of the United States is seen as completely intolerable by US elites. And thus, the US is becoming more aggressive. You know, we've had the so-called war on terror that ended with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, but look what's happened in the last couple of years. The US has been pushing for a NATO proxy war in Ukraine against a nuclear armed power Russia. There's been building up the massive military buildup in the Pacific against China, and now backing Israel's genocidal war on Gaza. So I just want to kind of take a moment just to look at some of the key developments in the Global South that Washington regards as so threatening. So number one, the extraordinary economic, social and technological development of China over the past 40 years. So the US sees bringing 850 million people out of poverty, and the transformation of China from one of the poorest countries in the world to a global superpower and an economic powerhouse as a problem, as a major threat to its hegemony. So this human progress is a problem. Number two, the rise and expansion of BRICS as an expression of the rise of the Global South. So from January 2024, the BRICS is set to expand from its founding 5 members to include 6 other new countries: Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. The fact that arch enemies, Iran and Saudi Arabia, have been brought together into a cooperative framework of the Global South organization, that in itself is a major blow to US political strategy of divide and rule in the Middle East. And also is the fact that BRICS will account for 37% of GDP compared to 30% from the G7. This is seen as a major threat to US hegemony. Number 3, the Belt and Road Initiative, which was launched 10 years ago. This is a key initiative for development in the Global South. So over the past 10 years, this initiative has attracted the support of 150 countries internationally. And there are 3,000 projects in the Belt and Road Initiative, which are worth $1 trillion. So these are really enormous numbers to get your head around. So I just wanted to share an experience from my visit to Nicaragua earlier this year in July to kind of paint a bit of a picture of this. So Nicaragua is one of the countries that signed up to the Belt and Road Initiative in 2022. And this year, Nicaragua and China have started their first major project together, which is building affordable housing. The first phase of this will see 920 units built in Managua with central square, sports fields and other facilities, the infrastructure to sustain new communities. And I asked a member of National Assembly when I was there, Professor Zubida, how Nicaragua's relationship with China differs from the United States. And he said the following: "We are bombarded with the idea that Russia and China are the aggressors. US troops have been on our soil 7 times, so we are very clear on who promotes military aggression because we have experienced it." And he went on to say that cooperation with China comes with no strings attached, no conditions, and no aggression, just support. And this story in Nicaragua, this is like stories all over the world in the global south. And that's why a kind of some phrase that's become quite popular is that where China has a Belt and Road initiative, the United States has a bomb and ruin initiative. So that's quite a popular phrase that's circulating. Number 4, in terms of what are the threats from as far as the United States is concerned from the global south. Number 4 is most countries in the world reject Washington's offensive against Russia. And this has been really clearly seen in relation to the war in Ukraine. The global south has refused to apply the sanctions against Russia that the West have and want the global south to go along with. And many countries have been putting forward proposals for a peace process to end the war, from China to African Mission to Lula in Brazil. So it's really clear that the global south is rejecting NATO's constant escalation in Ukraine, which has the explicit goal of weakening Russia. Today, as we've discussed, the international situation is being dominated by Israel's barbaric attack on Gaza, which is fully supported and sustained by the West, in particular the United States. And it does need to be emphasized that without the diplomatic, political, military support of the United States, European powers, and of course Britain, Israel wouldn't be in a position to wage this genocidal war on Gaza and sustain its occupation and colonization of Palestine. And if I was to put it very bluntly, the US President Biden could pick up the phone to Netanyahu and order a ceasefire, and there would be a ceasefire. So as to why the British government is refusing to back a ceasefire, despite all these massive protests and I think 76% of the population supporting it, because Britain's foreign policy is made in Washington. And as has been said by other speakers very eloquently, Israel, the United States, and Britain and other Western countries are defying an overwhelming international majority on Gaza. So you've had the vote at the UN, 140 countries voted for a ceasefire at the UN General Assembly on the 20th of October. There were only 14 countries that voted against a ceasefire. And tens of millions of people have taken to the streets to protest in support of Palestine in every continent of the world. And this is a movement that is growing. So we've got Israel, the United States, and Britain are extremely isolated, and other lackeys in the global north as well that are going along with this genocide. So why is the United States refusing to back a ceasefire? I think The Economist put it quite starkly. They had a front cover in October, which had the headline, picture of Biden, the headline, "America's Test." And I'm going to quote from it. The Israel-Hamas war will define America's global role. President Joe Biden has sent 2 hulking aircraft carriers to support Israel. They are a 200,000-ton show of strength at a time when much of the world believes that American power is in decline. The war and its aftermath will test that perception against reality. So yeah, you did hear that right. This is very diabolical thinking. This is a situation where Washington sees the situation in Gaza as an opportunity to show its power as a global hegemon. So you've got world opinion clearly with Gaza, clearly for a ceasefire, but Israel and the US are willing to pay a price, and they will pay a price in order to demonstrate their military power. So just finally, just want to say, Britain is taking the side of the United States against China, against the global south, and let's be clear, against the majority of humanity. And I want to quote Chinese intellectual Zhang Weiwei, who puts the global situation quite succinctly, I think, when he says, "The West policy is to divide and conquer, divide and rule, and China's policy is to unite and prosper." And what we're seeing is developing countries are focusing on achieving economic growth, building development projects. Obviously, there's many contradictions within organizations like BRICS and the Belt and Road Initiative, but that is the emphasis, and that's where they're pushing forward to. Whereas in the West, we've got economic stagnation, austerity, declining living standards, and rising military spending. Of course, in this situation, Britain should be embracing a more democratic world, which would mean embracing the rise of the global south and pursuing mutually beneficial cooperation. But currently, Britain is facing off to fight against these trends as a junior partner to the United States, and this offers no way forward for the British people, no way forward for humanity. And I think building an international peace movement is a key way we can challenge this trajectory. And in doing so, we have to be confident that although often it feels like we're in a minority, although on the question of Palestine, we're certainly not in a minority here in Britain, although it sometimes does feel like we're in a minority, we are on the side of the majority internationally, we're on the side of humanity, and we will overcome.